The John Justice Show on 104.1 The Truth, Tucson's News Talk FM.
7:08. Welcome back to the John Justice Show. 751-1041's the phone number. 53 degrees outside right now. Today, look for a high around 55. Showers, wind. We'll talk to K-Gun 9 on your sites. Brian Basham coming up at 8:30 this morning. Also, U of A Katie joining us live in studio just after 9 o'clock today. We'll find out what she learned in college this week. Joining us live in studio, and we're very pleased to have him here, is Senator John McCain. Good morning, sir, and how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine, John. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to be back. It's going to be an interesting weather day, but it's interesting in a lot of other ways, too.
You had an opportunity, although you didn't. You obviously didn't know, but when at your rally on Friday, U of A Katie, she's a student at the University of Arizona. She was standing next to me in line when we met yourself and Sarah Palin. Mm-hmm. She's become one of our most popular segments on the show. She's a student, and she comes in once a week to tell us what she learned in college. And what's been fascinating about it is that she's been able to do what we always hear about when it comes to the liberal bias that they're being taught at the university level. She come in and exposes it once a week, and it's become our most popular segment. She's a really brave girl for doing so too.
Well, I know we look forward to meeting her again, and that's a lot of courage.
We've got a lot of issues that we want to get to today.
And some calls.
And some calls as well. If you have any questions for Senator John McCain, we're going to open the phone lines up. We're going to be able to speak to the senator for the next hour. Before we get into all of that, being as the first time that I've had the opportunity to have you in studio, and with this primary race going on right now, getting a lot of press. We'll talk about that coming up as well. And the importance of what's going on. We get a lot of phone calls, and I mean, this goes back to the election. In regards to you, things that have happened in the past, bills you've tried to push forward. People always say, you got to ask this question, and it seems like every time I've had you on the show, we've asked you one or two of these questions. But I thought, let's start off and do a bit of a laying out of all of the questions that people have, and I'll go so far as to say complaints that people have had with you from over the years. The first one I want to start with, and we'll get back to this later on in the hour as we talk more about the murder of Robert Krentz on the border. But I want to talk specifically first about immigration and amnesty. It's probably the number one comment that I get from individuals when it comes to the McCain-Kennedy bill, as they call it, your views on amnesty, what you tried to push forward in the past, and let's lay it all out there. What were your views then? What are your current views now? And when it comes to amnesty, what is it that you would like to see?
Well, there was a time when I thought that we could get a proposal through the Congress that would be comprehensive in nature and had nothing to do with amnesty, but leave that aside. 3 years ago, I saw that the violence on the border and the existential struggle between the Mexican government and the drug cartels and others changed the situation very dramatically, because I believed, and we have just seen a terrible manifestation of it in Robert Krentz's murder. 3 American citizens murdered in Juarez last week, and the incredible violence. I've heard 14,000 people have been killed in the last 4 years in Mexico, murdered in this drug war. So before anything else, I said this a long time ago, we have to secure the border. We have to get the border secure. The border is not secure, and we need to do whatever we can to secure the borders, and that includes, frankly, some of the lessons we've learned in Iraq, as far as surveillance, as far as being able to track people, as far as able to have not only a physical fence, but a virtual fence, which, by the way, collapsed. So we have to get our border secure. If we get our border secure, then then start prosecuting people who hire people who are here illegally, and eventually people will go back to Mexico if there's not a job for them to hold. But have no doubt about about the dimensions of what's going on the other side of the border. This is a $65 billion a year business. There is, it was reported on K-Gun this morning. There's another huge shootout that just went on yesterday. And these people are well equipped. They're well trained, and they're the most vicious people in the world. So we have to get the border secured first. And that means bringing the National Guard to the border. Over a year ago, I had a hearing up in Phoenix of the Homeland Security Committee. We had the police chiefs and sheriffs there, and they talked about how great a threat this danger is, what a great danger and threat this violence on the border is. At that time, I called for, and so did John Kyle, for the National Guard to come to the border. We've got to get the Guard to the border. We've got to use UAVs. We've got to use surveillance. We've got to complete the fence. We've got to look at the way that the Border Patrol is doing business. Why shouldn't we move them closer to the border to protect some of these ranches? What are the lessons learned? It's obvious that this administration is not, this proposal is to reduce the Border Patrol. We need to beef it up, and we need to have the National Guard on the border. So have no doubt that over the last several years, this violence and this struggle has really changed the equation to the point where we have to get the border secured. And the violence is going to spill over into our country again and again unless we do.
If we were able to do that, and if we were able to go and do the best job that we know we're capable of sealing that border.
Yeah. And by the way, I never supported amnesty. Never. What the proposal was at that time is that people who, if they want to go back to the country they came from, apply to come and stand in line behind everybody else, pay fines, etc., then we would have some eligibility for citizenship. We can't even do that now until we get the border secured. But it was never amnesty. Ronald Reagan gave amnesty back in the 1980s to 2 million people. It didn't work. It caused more people to come to this country.
Well, and wasn't the contention then, because I was having a discussion with my mother-in-law about this yesterday, wasn't the contention then when Ronald Reagan proposed to do this, we were looking at a much different dynamic. We had fewer illegal aliens in the country at the time, and they said they were going to seal the border, and it didn't happen.
They said that part of the deal was to seal the border, and they did not do that. We learned a lesson from that, and I have never supported amnesty, never will. But the point is, even now, we cannot even take up any immigration reform of any kind until we get the border secured. If you don't get the border secured, then people will continue to come illegally no matter what we do.
Do you think that they're moving forward now with a comprehensive immigration reform bill before these November elections? Do you think it's going to happen?
No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They do not have 60 votes.
We were curious, and we'll go ahead and keep on this for a moment.
Yeah.
We've had Governor Jan Brewer had asked a while back for the National Guard. You had as well.
Over a year ago.
Yeah. Gabrielle Giffords has gone out to the ranchers now. She's asked President Obama and Congress for the National Guard. You've requested it again. We're still hearing silence, correct?
Silence is right, but we also, by the way, again, I'd like to see more UAVs in the air. I'd like to see better interoperability between the different enforcement agencies, sheriffs and the Border Patrol. I would like to see us looking at whether we should move these troops closer to the border. We should look at whatever increase is necessary with the Border Patrol. And again, we learned a lot of lessons in Iraq about how to surveil, how to identify, how to track, and how to apprehend. That's why we were able to win in Iraq. We should be looking at those lessons. I was at Fort Huachuca yesterday. There's a lot of techniques and capabilities that we developed during the Iraq War and that we're using in Afghanistan as well that we could apply to our border.
Is there any chance...
But a physical fence has to be first, by the way.
Is there any chance under this administration that you see that happening?
I think there's going to be such a outcry on the part of the American people that they will probably act. I don't know how quickly. But look, this violence is at such a level on the other side of the border that inevitably it spills over to our side. I mean, it's just something that as I say, I predict for 3 years. I went to Mexico City. President Calderon said, I'm in a struggle for the existence of my government. Mm-hmm. The drug cartels want to take over at least corridors of Mexico so that they can move freely the drugs that they want to bring into the United States of America, and it's a $65 billion a year business. You know, you can afford to dig a lot of tunnels and kill a lot of people with that kind of income from a business. And by the way, that does not mean in any way we should ever consider, in my view, legalization of drugs. But anyway.
751-1041 is the phone number. Let's go ahead and take a break. We'll get some more phone calls lined up. I have a few points that I want to ask you in regards to those comments you just made, Senator McCain. More with Senator John McCain coming up next. 751-1041 is the phone number. If you want to email as well, justice@1041thetruth.com. 721, welcome back to the John Justice Show. 751-1041 is the phone number. Joined live in studio with Senator John McCain. I want to go right to the phones, and we'll talk with Robert. Good morning, Robert. Welcome to 104.1 The Truth, and you are live with Senator John McCain.
Good morning, John, and good morning, Senator McCain. This is Robert. I was just looking at some statistics, and there's 955 full, complete deportations a day. And that breaks up families, and it breaks up people's educations, and actually removes, productive members of our society. But I understand the thing about jobs and identity theft, security. But I'm looking at the wrong side of my paper. The United States averages 27 full, complete deportations a day, and it's the government of Mexico deports 955 a day. And it's the government of Mexico that made it a punishable crime only by jail time for employing illegal aliens. And I'm just wondering, can we implement la ley, the law of Mexico, here in the United States? Because they seem to be able to do things we can't.
Well, all due respect to our friends to the south, I don't use them as a model for very much. Look, we need a temporary legal worker program. We forgot to mention that part of it. There is jobs that Americans don't choose to do, particularly in the agricultural sector. Go down to Yuma and talk to the producers down there. And by the way, the unions are unalterably opposed to a guest worker program. And we could have a workable guest worker program by giving someone a tamper-proof document that would expire at the end of the time that they were working temporarily, and then if an employer hired someone who has that expired period, they would be prosecuted. But this administration and the unions are trying to kill off any temporary legal worker program. Look, we had a Bracero program back in the 50s where people would come from Mexico back. It worked just fine till the unions killed it off. But look, all I can say is that if we can get the border secured, we don't have to worry about the deportation problem because they would have a lot more difficulty getting in. Now, one of the problems we have that we haven't talked about this morning is people who come on a visa and it expires and they stay. And they stay. Well, then we better get some kind of a visa that shows expiration dates, and wherever they go, if they are trying to get employment or go to school or whatever it is, unless they have a valid document, then they're going to be deported. But the biggest problem right now is the drug cartels, as much as anything else, which human smuggling is a part of, but drug cartels do both. But look, I can't emphasize enough this violence. There was a party of 15 young people. I think it was in Juarez. They went in and killed them all off. Yeah. Oops, mistaken identity. I mean, they cut people's heads off and hang their bodies from the overpass in Tijuana. And by the way, it's still the most active sector as far as apprehensions is concerned. Guess where? The Tucson sector. So we feel it here more than any place else in America.
Is there a level of assistance that we should be giving to Mexico to help them counter this? What should our response be?
We are giving them significant assistance, training. By the way, there was incident a month or two ago. 13 bodies were found at the side of the road, tortured and killed. They had one thing in common. They'd been trained by the United States. I mean, these people, the viciousness is unbelievable. We are investing over $1 billion a year with the Mexican government to try to help them with high-tech equipment, training, etc. But the problem is the corruption. Look, the corruption goes to the highest level. Every time there's a big problem, they have to send in the army because the police are so corrupt in these border areas that they obviously not only don't help, they are actively cooperating with the drug cartels. Again, a $65 billion a year business. You can buy a lot of police.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem in Mexico. And look, let's give Calderon some credit. because his predecessor really didn't do anything about it. And his popularity has suffered because there's a lot of Mexicans now that say, what? Why don't you just let it go through the United States? Why should we try to stop it? Well, problem is a lot of it does stop in Mexico. It doesn't all go to the United States. So
we had a call yesterday,
yep.
And it was it's one of those phone calls that I'm never going to forget. And it was a girl by the name of Michaela, and she knew Robert Krentz and lives on a ranch out on the border. This ranch had been in her family for generations. She said 12 years ago, she could leave their property and go out on the open desert range, whatever you want to call it, and there was not an issue. Now they don't dare go out unless there's somebody else with them, if they're carrying armed weapons, because of what's happening, and because of what's happened with Robert Krentz, we're now. And we know this has been going on, and this has been going on forever, but we've got our own American citizens trying to live out their own version of freedom, and they feel like, the government has betrayed them. Is there an immediate...
Probably why we need to move our forces closer to the border. I had a town hall meeting in Sierra Vista yesterday. A number of people came up and said, look, every time I go out of my house, I see someone there illegally. I drop my kids off at the bus stop. There's illegals standing there. The people are crossing their property, the trash, and the stories are unbelievable. Americans should not be required to live that way just because they live close to the Mexican border. That means get this border secured. Get the physical fence done. And by the way, I know we don't have a lot of time to go into all the details of this, but we let a contract to Boeing for, I think it was $3 billion. We're having a hearing on it, on Homeland Security, to build a virtual fence. Guess what? Total disaster, total failure. And yet down at Yuma, the Marines put in some very rudimentary surveillance equipment because illegals were crossing the Berry Goldwater ranges, which caused the cancellation of missions out of Davis Mountain and other places. And guess what? They've been able to secure their area, and it's very rare that there's an incident of an illegal crossing over in the Goldwater ranges. Well, if the Marines can do it, why in the world can't the Border Patrol and the Homeland Security people do it? It's outrageous.
And it just comes down to a lack of a will and desire to go and get it done, doesn't it?
Screwed up bureaucracies.
Yeah.
I think there's a will out there. There's a will for some bureaucrats sitting in Washington, D.C. I'd like to secure the border. But frankly, it's such a colossal failure, and it's the second time there's been a failure. Now, and again, this is a battle. It may not be a war, but it's a battle, okay? In Iraq, they have surveillance capability from UAVs. When they had the Battle of Sadr City, they were able to identify people, they were able to identify vehicles, they were able to track them, and they were able to stop them from doing bad things. Now, there is technology. First, the physical fence, though.
And it seems as if right now, if we knew that there was a comprehensive plan that was going in place that was going to be looking at it in that way, getting back to what I was saying about those ranchers that right now are asking what can be done. It would be great if we were in a position where this is what we're going to do instead of it seems like we're just going through the motions continually.
Let's start by getting the guard down on the border, and if they need to be armed, have them armed.
751-1041 is the phone number. We got time for one more phone call? Let's go ahead and go to the phones real quick. If we don't have time to get to all of the answer, we'll do it after the break, but we'll talk to Mark. Good morning, Mark. Welcome to 104.1 The Truth, and you're on with Senator John McCain.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Senator McCain. Welcome to Tucson.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, Senator, I have a question for you. It's sort of a philosophical question, but as our representative in the Senate, I'm really, really curious to get your thoughts. A lot of the electorate, myself included, feels that that the federal government has exceeded its scope, or that's called out in the in our Constitution. And just the size, the scope, the reach, so that the federal government literally has almost subverted the power of the states. And our legislature, I know, has raised the 10th Amendment issue, as a number of others have. I'm curious, as a senator up on Capitol Hill, how does the Congress view this, and how do you view it personally?
Let me tell you very quickly how I view it. I think that we are headed down a path towards European socialism. I think that this massive government takeover of Ford, of General Motors, of Chrysler and General Motors, of AIG, of this massive intervention into 1/6 of our gross national product in the name of healthcare reform. This president is governing from the left in a right-of-center nation, which I think accounts for his reduction in popularity. We see more and more assumption by the federal government of the prerogatives of the states and the private sector, and that's what it's terribly disturbing. And when you look at the massive debt that we laid on our kids and our grandkids, it's an incredible and unprecedented act of generational theft.
751-1041 is the phone number. Still lots to get to with Senator John McCain. Your phone calls as well. 751-1041. 731 on the John Justice Show. It's 104.1 The Truth, Tucson's News Talk FM.
Tucson's News Talk FM.
735, welcome back to the John Justice Show. 751-1041 is the phone number. We're joined live in studio with Senator John McCain this morning.
John, could I, in response to that last caller, could I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
We were talking off mic on the healthcare reform as an example of what I was trying to say. Where is it in the Constitution that says the federal government can force an individual to buy a product, set the standards of that product, and then fine them if they don't? Now, it seems to me that the constitutionality of this, quote, healthcare reform is incredibly questionable. And I'm not saying that it's unconstitutional, but I have certainly talked to some very knowledgeable constitutional scholars that at least argue that we should be in court on this case. And by the way, one other thing, I know people, when I say repeal, people say, well, you're not going to be able to do it because you have to be able to override the president's veto. Look, we gain majorities in both houses, which I am confident that we can in November. Then the power of the purse, my friend, if you cut off the money, it doesn't take overriding a presidential veto. The Congress has the power of the purse, and we can cut off the funding for some of the radical parts of this health care reform.
Well, and that was what I've been hearing, and I was going to ask you about was when we talk about what can be done in repealing this, you touched upon it. I heard that, if we take back Congress, then we can cut off the funding, and then potentially, depending on who wins in 2012, there is a possibility that we can bring it all back, can't we?
Absolutely. And there's just one other point I want to make on it, and that is that the American people overwhelmingly are opposed to this legislation. And it's the first time in history a major reform has passed on a pure partisan basis with the objections of the American people. By the way, I know we haven't got a lot of time, but on Sunday I was watching Stephanopoulos, and they had Haley Barbour, the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, great guy, and Rendell, the governor of Pennsylvania, who's a liberal Democrat, nice guy. And I think it was Jake Tapper who was running the show, said, well, Governor Barbour, don't you think that it's incredible that so many Americans now are supporting the health care reform, that so many Americans are now coming on board? And Haley Barbour, who's really a smart and entertaining guy, said, well, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that more Americans aren't. I said, aren't supporting Obamacare now. He says it was the longest, biggest, wettest kiss in history by the liberal media of the vote. I thought it was a great line that he had. And it was. Look at the way the liberal media welcomed this, quote, victory, a victory that they had to get by not ever going back to the United States Senate because Scott Brown would have derailed it. And the American people spoke with the election of Scott Brown and the election of the governor in New Jersey and the election of the governor in Virginia. I mean, and they completely are ignoring what is clearly the will of the people.
This is kind of going to bookend this one because I think they play into each other. I've been hearing, and more specifically, Neil Bortz, who's on at 10 o'clock this morning, made a comment yesterday that when it came to Obama, before he was elected, didn't imagine that couldn't have imagined what would have happened, that it would have gotten this bad. He knew that, he didn't support Barack Obama, didn't like what he said on the campaign trail, but didn't expect it to get as bad as it's gotten.
Well, he should have looked at his voting record in the Senate. I tried to point out during the campaign, he had the most liberal voting record of any senator in the United States Senate. And given some of the members of the United States Senate, that's going a long way. But also he didn't have an extensive record, and he did campaign that he was going to change the climate in Washington. Here's a guy, and in all due respect, 8 times during the campaign, he said on health care reform specifically, they would have the C-SPAN cameras in. And then the American people would be able to watch the negotiations. The sleazy, smarmy, Chicago-style deal making that they make as it's worse than I've ever seen in the years I've been in Washington.
We've heard, and more recently, and I think I have an answer to this, but I'm gonna let you. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to speak for you. In regards to the current primary race with your opponent, you've come out in your ads and been very vocal and strong and aggressive in those ads. I've heard from people that have said they like what they hear in the ads. They don't have a problem with that. What they're questioning is they go, well, where was that McCain during the election? Because you took such a strident stance on not going after, the William Ayers and the Reverend Wright and those aspects of Obama during the time of the election. So I want to give you a chance to clear the air on that and sort of explain the thought process then and your thought process now.
I didn't go after the Reverend Wright because I thought the American people could make up their own mind on that issue. But I went after him. I went after him every single day, warning Americans, first trying to provide my agenda for the future of this country, which I can assure you very drastically different than that one they're pursuing today, and trying to tell people that this individual was a far left liberal, which we respect, but don't think is the right thing for America. I think that I went after him every day. I went after him on every single major issue that Americans cared about. Remember the economy being in the tank, and so I went after him as hard as I possibly could, and I'm proud of the campaign we ran. And I'll just tell you a fact: we were 3 points ahead the day that the stock market tanked and went down 700 points, and we were ahead by 3 points, and we're down 7 points at the end of the day. But I'm proud of the campaign we ran. I'm proud of Sarah Palin. I'm fascinated by the continuous vicious attacks on her by the liberal media. They must be scared to death of her. And I'm proud of the people that supported us, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity.
I think I have an answer to that, by the way. I think Andrew and I both sort of witnessed this on our own, because I'm a fan of Sarah Palin, and I like what she has to say and what she stands for. But, like you just said, the attacks on her have just been relentless. But I think I figured it out. When we had a chance to finally meet her on Friday, she is a very commanding presence, and she's a very strong individual. And I think just a lot of people are just incredibly threatened by that. I think it's fear from a lot of individuals, and a fear from the media as well.
Well, look at the feminist left. Here's a person who has attracted the support and admiration of men and women, but a lot of women in America. She's a conservative, strong family, strong values, strong conservative positions. She must be viewed as a threat to them, by them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be attacking her. But the viciousness of these attacks, I'm a pretty tough guy, but I'll tell you, it's really remarkable, some of it.
Real quick, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but any in hindsight, being what it is, pure number of votes in the election. Obama didn't win by that much on sheer number of votes. Anything you would have done differently?
Oh, I'm sure there's 1,000 things I would have done differently.
Can of worms open.
Could I mention to you that I did run 5 points ahead of the Republican Party per se. So I ran ahead of the Republican candidates. In other words, I carried some 40-some districts that Democrats carried on in House races. But look, I could have done 1,000 things better. But whenever there's a winning campaign, it's perfect. A losing campaign was, But again, one of the proudest times for me is that Sarah Palin agreed to be my running mate.
The one issue that I probably had the most questions on, or the biggest problem with, is the issue of global warming. I'm under the contention, for me personally, that while if it's happening, it's Earth cycles and not man-made. And again, going back to the questions that we get about you on the show all the time, what is your position on global warming? What is your position on cap and trade? And is there a level of cap and trade-esque reform that you would be willing to accept at this point in time?
Back about 20 years ago, we had a system where we were able to reduce sulfur dioxide, the acid rain, and it worked. We were able to reduce acid rain by a simple method of giving people credit for reducing the emissions of acid rain. And so that worked, and it was fine. What the administration proposed was cap and tax. They they put in their first budget $683 billion of revenues from, quote, cap and trade. That's not cap and trade, that's cap and tax. And the other thing is they refuse to have anything to do meaningfully with nuclear power. Thanks to the power of Harry Reid, they shut down Yucca Mountain. Do you know that we spent $10 billion of ratepayers' money on Yucca Mountain, and they decided because of Harry Reid to close it? Now we have no place to store spent nuclear fuel. They refuse to recycle. The French, the British, and the Japanese recycle. We've got a nuclear power plant here in Arizona called Palo Verde. It does fine, and it keeps rates lower than they would be if people weren't getting their power from other more conventional sources. Look, we've got to have nuclear power. It will reduce our dependency on foreign oil, and it will provide us with cheap, clean power. And again, French, British, Japanese, they all do it. Other countries do it. Let me just also say on the offshore drilling, as usual with the Obama administration, there's less there than meets the eye, okay? Why not drill off California? Why not have more areas off of Alaska? Why not have more areas off of the East Coast? And some of these areas that they say they're opening up, they were already moving forward with that. Look, I'm glad they did it. Drill, baby, drill. Now we'll see if the environmentalists control the Democrats in Congress enough so that we can move forward with this offshore drilling. We have to do it. Price of oil is creeping back up. Duh. And here we are as the world's economy begins to recover. So nuclear power has got to be a key component, and if you don't recycle and if you don't have a place to store, there's no nuclear power.
Do you think that that global warming is occurring? Do you think that we have any kind of power to stop it?
I don't know, because I think the British, obviously, the institution that was supposed to be giving us this scientific evidence, there's significant questions about it. But let's suppose that there's no such thing as global warming. Let's still try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's a good thing to do. We can do it through nuclear power and reduce costs to consumers. Why don't we? Solar's fine. Wind, tide, all these things are fine. As long as we don't increase costs and taxes to the American citizen who is hurting very badly, more so than any time since the Great Depression. Do not do anything that will raise people's rates. But reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Let's suppose that it isn't true. Let's suppose it is true. Whatever. Let's reduce them. And nuclear power is the best way to do that.
Do you think Obama's move with opening up that offshore drilling is a move to try to extend an olive branch to try to push cap and trade later on before the November election?
That's exactly what it's all about. That's exactly what it's all about. I can't tell you the number of times they've approached me about nuclear power, about saying, we'll have loan guarantees. Fine. Let's have more loan guarantees. We'll expedite the licensing process. That's fine. Thank you very much. Where are you going to store it, and where are you going to recycle? Oh, no, we can't do that.
751-1041 is the phone number. We'll take one more quick break. If anybody has any questions for Senator John McCain, we'll take those phone calls coming up. We have just a few minutes left with Senator John McCain live in studio on the John Justice Show. Right now, 747 is your 104.1 The Truth News Time. We check in with Big Al in the 104.1 Traffic Center.
And John, not a wreck, but we have some light slowing again now. This is the second wave that we have eastbound I-10 from approaching Ruth Roth down to around Prince. Our photo radar, Glenn from Campbell to Tucson Boulevard right now. That's until 9 o'clock this morning. Then the other one on Grant from Wilmot to Craycroft this morning till 9 o'clock also. This afternoon, actually late this morning into this afternoon, I-10 from milepost 289 to 290 has travel restrictions for both east and westbound out near Marsh Station Road. They're going to cut you down to just one lane. Last time they did this about a week and a half ago, it was quite busy, backed up for miles during midday. So they're doing it again midday today as they continue to prepare for the new Marsh Station interchange along Interstate 10, about 2 miles east of where the existing interchange sits now. I'm Big Al, KGUN 9 on your side with traffic. 104.1 The Truth is Tucson's News Talk FM.
And live in studio, any questions you have for the Senator, give us a call right now. 751-1041 is the phone number. It's the John Justice Show on 104.1 The Truth Tucson.
Standing up for what's right and keeping you informed. This is Justice on 104.1 The Truth.
Tucson's News Talk FM.
I feel like if the former McPain-mobile is officially dead, I feel like it's come full circle because I was finally able to show Senator John McCain the photos of the cars the way it was decorated during the election. So
I tell you, you're a brave.
Oh, my and you know what? A lot of credit goes to my wife as well because I took her out and met a few times and she was just like, "Really? Is this what we're gonna do?"
God bless her.
Let's go back to the phones
Sure.
and we'll talk with Ray. Good morning, Ray. Welcome to 104.1 The Truth, and you're live with Senator John McCain.
Well, thank you for allowing us to speak with Mr. McCain. I appreciate your service, sir. Thank you very much. My question is I'm in my 50s, and in my observations over my lifetime in each administration, the only administration I really felt the impact was for the common good of the common working man was the Reagan administration because I felt it in my pocketbook. And it seems that the Democrats have had a focal point and coalesced over the past 50 or so years to destroy capitalism and then install socialism through the manipulation of the education system and the media. How do you respect that the Republicans can have a strong focal point and coalesce in the same manner to beat back socialism?
Well, let me just tell you two things that and by the way, I do believe that it is a governing from the far left, which could lead to European socialism. I know how some people go crazy when you say socialism, but the fact is, we're leading that way. Two things we have to do. One is we Republicans have to clean up our act, okay? And that is that when under President Bush, we let spending get completely out of control. We voted for programs such as the Medicare Part D, which we didn't pay for, and another $1 trillion debt. We allowed earmarking, pork barreling, which, by the way, Jeff Flake and I fought against. The earmarking, pork barreling led to corruption. Abramoff, members of Congress going to jail. And with spending going completely out of control, we lost our base. We have to promise people that we'll stop the earmarking and pork barreling and bringing home the bacon. The second thing we Republicans have to do is to come up with a contract for America. And I would say the number one of about 10 is a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I don't know any other way, frankly, right now that will force us to get our fiscal house in order. A promise to stop the earmarking and pork barreling, a long list of things. So we have to, the independence is the rise in registration, as you know, John, and we have to get people back to our Republican banner. We have to clean up our act, promise we won't let spending get out of control again, and come up with a positive agenda. And part of that agenda, by the way, is to repeal and replace this Obamacare.
I want to get back
Thanks
to
for the call. It's an excellent question.
I want to get back to, there's one phone call I want to make sure we get to, but we're on the lines of spending. The difference in your opinion between the Bush bailout before the end of the election and the stimulus package and your differentiation of the two.
Well, first of all, very quickly, the TARP, the President of the United States and everybody said the world financial system was on the verge of collapse. But more importantly, they said it's the housing market that is the catalyst for this crisis. We'll go directly at the housing market. It's well documented. It's well documented that that's what they told the American people. Within just a few days, Paulson said, no, we're going to bail out the financial institutions. They did. They're doing fine now. Wall Street's doing just fine, making billions while they ignored Main Street. And the housing issue has still not been addressed effectively. I wanted to do a homeowners loan administration where you go in, you take buy people's mortgage, give it back to them at the level that at payments they can afford. That would have been a workable system, and we still haven't addressed the housing crisis. I don't have to tell anybody in Arizona. The second thing is the stimulus package. I proposed the Republican alternative. We had an alternative that had to do with tax cuts and small businesses. It was a disaster. It is a $1.1 trillion bill if you count the interest. And in my view, of course it's created some jobs, but you know, most of the jobs have been created government jobs. Yeah. Government jobs, not private sector jobs. Meanwhile, small businesses in America and Arizona are still hurting very terribly. The stimulus package, in my view, was one of the worst things that's ever been done, and they were able to obviously pick up a couple of Republicans. One of them used to be a Republican, Specter, the defector. But anyway, look, there's a huge difference and the world financial system was about to collapse, and the TARP was sold as going after the housing market. They deceived the Congress and the American people because they then bailed out Wall Street, I guess figuring out that there would be some kind of trickle down. Yeah. Meanwhile, we still have not addressed the crisis, and meanwhile, we have mortgaged our children and our grandchildren's futures in the most obscene fashion.
Let's talk with Ami. Good morning, Ami. Welcome to the John Justice Show. We got about 3 minutes left, but you're on with Senator John McCain.
Good morning. Thank you. It's an honor. I'll keep it short, and I'll take my answer off the air. I want to know if John McCain can address the nadir in the U.S.-Israel relationships under President Obama and his complete opposite, which is Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much. Have a good morning.
He's talking in regards to our relationship, the low point regarding the U.S. relations with the U.S. and Israel right now. And,
terribly mishandled, insisting on a freeze on the settlements. The Palestinians hadn't insisted on that. Then we dropped the insistence. The Palestinians don't drop their insistence. I have to tell you, those settlements are part of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, okay? They were not Palestinian areas. They were Israeli areas, and to make a big deal out of it, and to all it does is encourage the radical elements in the Arab world, in my view. Go ahead.
Keeping on foreign relations, because we're just about out of time. I have the story here in front of me. U.S. says weapons in Iran sent from Afghanistan. Are we doing what we need to do right now in regards to what's happening with Iran, or what should be done right now?
I think we're going to give them another last chance. I think that's about their 10th last chance. This is your last chance, and this is your last chance. We could go all the way back to last fall, to the December, to January, to February. Apparently, they're going to try to get something through the UN. The Chinese will either object or water it down. What we need to do is join with our Europeans, impose tough sanctions. And by the way, one of the things we need to do is identify on the internet and on YouTube and Facebook and every place else the pictures of these people who are torturing and killing and murdering innocent Iranians. The human rights abuses in this administration, I tell you, I don't know how often we're going to ask them to unclench the fist, okay? These are bad people, and it's a threat to peace in the world, and we've got to get serious about it, and this administration isn't serious.
Senator John McCain, thank you so much for taking time out this morning. As always, thank you for your service, sir.
John, thank you, and I'm going to recommend you for the Distinguished Flying Cross for driving that car around this area, and at least that's the least we can do. Thanks of a grateful nation. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.